Detroit Diesel launched in 1938 as a division of General Motors, building engines that would go on to power everything from tanks and tugboats to grain trucks and generator sets. Their compact packaging, high-revving nature, and rugged two-stroke design made them a favorite across American industry. Their naming system was as straightforward as their engineering. A 671 meant 6 inline cylinders at 71 cubic inches each, while a 12V71 indicated a V-block configuration with 12 cylinders. Add a T for turbocharged or an A for aftercooled, and you had the full story right there in the badge. Known for their signature sound, modular design, and battlefield-tested reliability, Detroit's two-strokes were built to run hard and long. While they were rarely found in factory-built farm tractors, they became indispensable in the support equipment that kept farms moving, from grain haulers and irrigation pumps to field prep machinery and custom builds. Today, we're counting down the top 5 Detroit Diesel two-stroke engines that helped shape American farming and industry, on and off the field. At number 5 on our list is the Detroit Diesel 6V92, a powerhouse that didn't really belong on the farm, but still managed to find its way there. Introduced in 1974, this compact two-stroke V6 packs serious muscle into a small footprint. In its most powerful configurations, the 6V92 cranked out up to 350 horsepower and 1,050 pound-feet of torque, delivering through a root-style blower and optional turbocharging. The 6V92 earned its stripes on the road, not in the field. Max, Internationals, and GMC heavy-duty trucks running this engine were a common sight during harvest season, pulling long loads of grain and silage from the field to the elevator, often before sunrise and long after dark. Its sharp exhaust note let you know exactly what was under the hood, even before the truck crested the hill. It wasn't just the pulling power that made the 6V92 a favorite for farm transport, it was the compact design. With 6 cylinders packed into a V layout, it left room for easier maintenance and shorter hoods, perfect for tight turns in grain yards and processing plants. And for those who believed rules were just suggestions, the 6V92 found its way into some outrageous custom tractors. Whether it was built for tractor pulls or just to turn heads at a local show, this engine made its presence known the moment it fired up. Outside the fields, this engine was found in city transit buses, fire trucks, and even military vehicles. It hauled people, water, and supplies with the same brutal efficiency it brought to the farm. And wherever it went, it made sure you knew it was coming, with that sharp, unmistakable Detroit Diesel scream. Of course, it wasn't all good news. These engines had a well-earned reputation for thirst. Under load, the 6V92 could burn through fuel like no tomorrow. Fine for a short run to the grain elevator, but a headache for anyone trying to stretch a day's work without stopping for fuel. And while the modular design made certain repairs straightforward, regular maintenance was non-negotiable. Blowers had to stay clean, injectors needed frequent inspection, and operators who pushed the engine hard without proper care found themselves chasing coolant leaks and worn bearings sooner than they'd like. And although the 6V92 could technically be crammed into a custom tractor, its high-revving, narrow power band didn't always make for the most practical field work. In the end, this engine wasn't born for farming, but it sure didn't mind rolling up its sleeves when the work needed to get done. The specs shown reflect the typical configurations used in land-based applications like trucks and farm support equipment. Marine versions of the 671 often pushed higher power and torque figures due to different tuning and turbocharging setups. If there's one engine that introduced generations of farmers to the sound of a Detroit Diesel, it was the 671. Built for medium-duty trucks and industrial equipment, it typically powered everything around the farm except the tractors, unless someone dropped one in aftermarket. From grain trucks to irrigation pumps, the 671 kept farms running when tractors couldn't do it alone. Originally introduced in 1938, the 671 was the foundation of the entire Series 71 lineup. It featured 71 cubic inches of displacement per cylinder, totaling 426 cubic inches across all 6. With unit injectors and the standard roots blower for scavenging, it made peak power near 2100 RPM. In land-based applications, output typically ranged from 200 to 238 horsepower and up to 660 pounds-per-foot of torque. Marine and turbocharged variants could push those numbers even higher. But in the support equipment farmers relied on every day, this was plenty to get the job done. When it came to heavy hauling, the 671 was the engine farmers trusted. During harvest, fully loaded grain trucks and silage haulers counted on its steady pulling power to make the trip from the field to the elevator without missing a beat. Mack, White, and GMC cabovers with Detroits under the hood became a familiar sight on rural roads. But it wasn't just about transportation. The 671 also found its way onto the farm in other critical roles, powering irrigation pumps, running belt-driven implements, and serving as a reliable backup generator when the grid went down. Its ability to operate for long hours under steady load made it a dependable choice for everything from water delivery to stationary threshing, often running all day without a break to keep essential farm operations moving. In rare cases, farmers and fabricators dropped the 671 directly into custom tractor builds. These weren't production models. They were home-built four-wheel drive machines or pulling rigs designed for raw power, showmanship, or very specific field tasks. Its size and weight didn't make it ideal for tight row work, but when it was used, it left a lasting impression. Beyond agriculture, the 671 gained legendary status during World War II. It powered the M4A2 and M4A4 Sherman tanks, landing craft, and a wide range of mobile military equipment. Its reliability under battlefield conditions only cemented its reputation, and after the war, many of those engines found second lives in civilian trucks, generators, and industrial machines. Still, the 671 came with its share of drawbacks. Like all two-strokes, it needed high RPMs and steady load to run efficiently, something that didn't always match the stop-and-go rhythm of farm work. The roots blower helped with scavenging across the power band, but it also added mechanical complexity and made the engine less fuel efficient than a naturally aspirated four-stroke. Noise was just part of the deal. The 671 had a sharp mechanical bark that cut through the air like nothing else on the road. Fans loved the raw, aggressive sound. But after hours in the cab or standing next to a running unit, it wore thin fast. Out on the highway or tucked away on a remote pump site, it wasn't so bad. But up close, it could leave your ears ringing. Fuel consumption was also a concern. At wide open throttle, the 671 could burn through diesel at a rate that made smaller, slower engines look frugal. And although parts were readily available, maintenance still required vigilance, especially with injectors and seals that didn't appreciate dirty fuel or skip service intervals. Despite these quirks, the 671 earned its place in farming history, not for what it did in the field, but for everything it did around it. It wasn't a row crop hero, but it was the power behind the scenes, keeping America's farms moving when it mattered most. When it came to brute force and unmistakable sound, few engines left a bigger mark than the Detroit Diesel 12V71. Built for serious industrial work, this wasn't an engine you found in typical farm tractors. But for those chasing raw power and custom builds, it was the go-to choice. At peak performance, the turbocharged 12V71 produced up to 650 horsepower and delivered as much as 1,400 pound-feet of torque. That's the kind of power that could move mountains, whether turning marine propellers, hauling oversized loads, or driving heavy machinery in some of the toughest environments on Earth. It achieved these numbers through a cast-iron block, dry-sleeve design, and its signature root-style blower feeding air into the two-stroke cylinders. Although it never appeared in factory-built farm tractors, farmers and custom builders still found ways to put this powerhouse to work. Some mounted it in custom high-horsepower tractors for pulling competitions. while others installed it in massive grain haulers and silage trucks to make quick work of long hauls. Outside the fields, the 12V71 built its legacy powering some of the hardest working machines in America. It was a mainstay in commercial shipping, found in tugboats, fishing vessels, and even luxury yachts. On land, it drove logging trucks across rugged terrain and served as the beating heart of heavy construction equipment, including massive cranes, rock crushers, and industrial generators that kept job sites running around the clock. As with the other Detroit two-strokes we've talked about, noise was a major concern. In a tugboat engine room or behind the cab of a logging truck, the relentless high RPM operation created a level of mechanical clatter that was impossible to ignore. Many found that ear protection wasn't optional, it was necessary. Then there was the fuel consumption. These engines were not designed with economy in mind. Under heavy load, the 12V71 could burn through fuel at a staggering rate. Fine for a tugboat or a commercial hauler where range wasn't a concern, but a major drawback for anyone trying to run long shifts without constant refueling. Maintenance required regular attention, but the engine's modular design helped offset some of that burden. Individual cylinder heads could be serviced without disturbing the entire engine, and parts were widely available. Mechanics familiar with Detroit diesels often found them relatively straightforward to work on, especially compared to more complex engines of the time. When repairs were necessary, they could still be expensive simply due to the size and number of components involved. With 12 cylinders and a pair of blowers to maintain, there was more hardware to monitor and more opportunities for wear. Operators who pushed these engines hard, especially at sustained high RPM, risked failures like cracked heads, worn liners, and premature bearing wear. If any Detroit diesel engine could be called the utility player of the two-stroke lineup, it was the 6V53. Compact, rugged, and surprisingly powerful for its size. The 6V53 wasn't built with tractors in mind, but that didn't stop it from playing a supporting role on farms across North America. First released in the late 50s, the 6V53 featured 6 cylinders in a V configuration, displacing 318 cubic inches in total. A standard roots blower gave it the airflow needed to scavenge the cylinders in typical two-stroke fashion, and some versions were equipped with a turbocharger to push output even further. Depending on the setup, this engine could generate anywhere from 165 to 250 horsepower and up to 545 pound-feet of torque, all while revving close to 2,800 RPM. Its success in military vehicles like the M113 Armored Personnel Carrier and M114 Reconnaissance Vehicle helped build a reputation for toughness and reliability. That same rugged design later proved valuable in logging equipment and heavy-duty farm support vehicles, where dependable performance under harsh conditions was a must. Like the other Detroit engines here, it earned its keep in the machines that worked alongside tractors rather than in them. Log skidders, dozers, cranes, and off-road haulers equipped with 6V53s tackled the tough jobs that had to be done before a field was even ready for planting. It also kept irrigation pumps and stationary power units humming on remote farms where dependable high-output diesels were critical. A handful of custom builders couldn't resist pushing it further. They squeezed these compact V6 engines into polling rigs and experimental high-horsepower tractors, looking for Detroit diesel performance without the sheer size and weight of a 12V71. While it never became a staple in the polling world, it made for some unforgettable one-off builds. But the 6V53 came with its quirks. Like all Detroits, it thrived at high RPMs and full load. Lug it down like a typical diesel, and performance suffered. It also wasn't quiet. The high-revving V6 with a blower and optional turbo lit out that unmistakable Detroit roar, which made hearing yourself think a bit of a challenge. Fuel consumption was another consideration. While more efficient than its bigger siblings, the 6V53 still burned through fuel faster than a comparable 4-stroke engine, especially under constant heavy use. And because of its military and industrial origins, parts and service sometimes required specialized knowledge. Though for those familiar with 2-strokes, its modular design made certain repairs more straightforward. In the end, the 6V53 didn't make headlines on the farm, but its presence was hard to miss. Whether howling from a dozer clearing fields or rumbling under a grain truck on rough terrain, this engine handled the heavy work without complaint. And lastly, if there's one Detroit diesel engine that defined the sound of American horsepower, it's the 8V71. Nicknamed the Screamin' Jimmy, this V8 wasn't built for subtlety. It was built to announce its presence and get the job done fast, loud, and wide open. Like the others we've covered, it still found its way onto the farm, just not usually under the hood of a standard tractor. Instead, it showed up in the support equipment that kept big operations moving, and occasionally in some of the wildest custom tractor builds ever seen. At its peak, the turbocharged version of the 8V71 produced up to around 350 horsepower and over 1,100 pound-feet of torque. That power came from the 568 cubic inches of displacement, a rugged cast-iron block, dry-sleeve design, and a roots blower that kept the cylinders well fed with air at all times. While some custom builds pushed those numbers higher, it was rarely seen in typical farm work. Instead, it showed up where brute force mattered: grain trucks, haulers, and heavy support vehicles hauling massive loads to and from the fields. If you were at a grain elevator in the 1970s or 80s, chances are you heard one coming long before you saw it. Beyond farm work, the 8V71 earned its reputation in heavy-duty trucks, logging operations, construction sites, and the marine industry. It powered everything from tugboats to military landing craft and became a favorite in the logging world for hauling massive loads up steep grades without hesitation. But the 8V71 didn't just come with all that power. It came with a reputation. Operators unfamiliar with the 8V71's high revving demands often found themselves facing premature failures, cracked heads, worn liners, and serious overheating. Fuel consumption was another drawback. This wasn't the engine you picked up when you were counting pennies at the pump. Under heavy load, it could burn through fuel at a rate that made even seasoned operators raise an eyebrow. Fine for a tugboat or commercial hauler, but not ideal when you're trying to stretch a fuel budget through a full season. Like every Detroit on this list, the 8V71 delivered that unmistakable howl. Thrilling at first, but after 10 hours bouncing off metal cabs and grain bins, even the most dedicated operators were ready for some quiet. Despite those challenges, the 8V71 built a legacy of raw, unapologetic power. In the right hands and under the right conditions, it ran harder and lasted longer than almost anything else in its class. And even today, when a Detroit fires up at a tractor pull or vintage show, people stop what they're doing and listen. Because nothing else sounds quite like a Screamin' Jimmy doing what it was born to do.